Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to our deep dive on the global market for compound intermediate alloys.
Right. These are pretty specialized metal mixtures, essential stuff.
Yeah, foundational components, really. Think aerospace, automotive, electronics, construction. They're everywhere in heavy industry.
Exactly. And, understanding their demand gives you a window into broader manufacturing health.
So today we're working from excerpts of a market overview and forecast report, Our Mission.
Well, basically, to pull out the core numbers, look at the growth and really dig into how it plays out region by region.
Okay, so let's start with the big picture, the global numbers. What are we seeing?
Right up front, the report puts the market at roughly $37.5 billion. That was back in 2021.
Okay, 37.5 billion. And looking ahead.
It's projected to climb about $46.2 billion by 2025, and then quite a jump to nearly $70 billion. $69.85 billion to be precise by 2033.
Wow, so nearly doubling in what, 12 years?
Pretty much. That works out to an overall global compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of about 5.3% between 2021 and 2033.
5.3% globally. That feels like pretty robust, steady growth.
It is. It's significant, especially for materials that underpin so much industrial activity.
But like you said, the global figure is just the start. The regional breakdown is where it gets interesting.
Oh, absolutely. That's where you see the real dynamics. Let's get into that.
Okay, so quick recap. $37.5 billion in 21, aiming for almost $70 billion by 33, with that 5.3% global CAGR. Now let's break it down. How about North America?
Okay, North America. It's a major chunk of the market. The report shows the region starting at around, call it $11 billion in 2021.
11 billion. And the projection?
Growing to about $13 billion by 2025, and then hitting over $19 billion by 2033.
So significant volume there. How's the growth rate, the CAGR, compare?
The regional KGR for North America comes in at 4.877%. So, just a little under that global average of 5.3%.
Interesting. And within North America, the U.S. must be the giant.
Oh, absolutely. The U.S. started at about $8.3 billion in 2021. It's expected to reach over $14.3 billion by 2033.
And its growth rate?
The U.S. KGR is 4.79%. Again, just slightly under the regional and global average.
Okay. What about Canada and Mexico?
Canada's market started around $1.4 billion in 2021. It's actually growing a bit faster than the U.S.
Oh, really?
Yeah, its CGR is 5.277%, so it's projected to reach over $2.5 billion by 2033.
Okay, and Mexico?
Mexico also shows pretty strong growth. Started at $1.2 billion, projected to hit over $2.1 billion.
Right.
Its CGR is almost 5%, 4.992%.
So North America, large, growing steadily, maybe not quite as fast as the global pace overall, but still very significant.
Exactly. That's a good summary.
All right, let's hop across the Atlantic. Europe. What's the story there?
Europe's another really substantial market. Started at roughly $8.9 billion back in 2021.
Okay, nearly 9 billion.
Forecast to grow to about $10.7 billion by 2025, and then pass $15.9 billion by 2033.
And the growth rate, how does that compare?
Its regional CGR is 5.132%, so
Yeah.
much closer to that global 5.3% than North America was. Pretty solid.
And the report breaks down specific countries in Europe too, right? Anything stand out?
Definitely. Germany is a key player. Its market was about $1.7 billion in 2021, but it's projected to hit over $3.1 billion by 2033.
That sounds like strong growth.
It is. Germany's CEGR is notably higher than the regional average at 5.533%. Very strong.
Okay. How about the UK?
The UK also shows solid growth. It started around $0.7 billion, projected to reach over $1.3 billion by 2033. CEGR is 5.373%, so also quite healthy.
Interesting. Now, I remember seeing France had maybe a slightly different picture.
Yeah, that's right. France is a decent-sized market, started at $0.83 billion, but its growth projection to just over $1.3 billion by 2033. Well, that gives it a lower CGR.
How low?
It's 4.073%, so noticeably slower than Germany or the UK.
And Italy. Similar story.
Italy's growth rate is also on the lower end, yeah. A TGR of 3.692%. Started at about $0.34 billion, forecast to reach just under $500 million, $0.48 billion by 2033.
The report also mentioned Russia, I think?
It did. Russia's market was around $1.3 billion in 2021. Projected CGR is 4.85%, so expected to reach over $2.2 billion by 2033.
Okay. Spain.
Spain actually shows healthier growth, more like the UK. Started at $2.57 billion, aiming for nearly $1 billion by 2033. That's a 5.346% CAGR.
And any Nordic countries mentioned?
Yep. Sweden is listed with a TAGR of 3.857%. going from $0.4 billion to about $0.62 billion.
It's lower again.
A bit, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Denmark, though, is growing faster at 4.808%, from $0.37 billion to $0.64 billion.
Okay.
Luxembourg, too. Luxembourg, a smaller market in this context, started at $0.24 billion. Its CAGR is 4.597%, expected to reach about $0.38 billion.
So quite a mix across Europe. But what about the rest of Europe? Sometimes those categories hide interesting trends.
They definitely do here. The rest of Europe segment, that's all the other countries bundled together, it actually shows a really strong CAGR.
Stronger than the average.
Yeah, 5.784%. It's growing from about $2.16 billion to over $4.3 billion. That really suggests there are some significant growth pockets, maybe in Eastern Europe or elsewhere, that aren't individually listed but are collectively driving strong growth.
Yeah. Fascinating. Okay, let's shift gears. Head east, Asia Pacific. This region often leads growth stories. How does it look here?
Oh, it absolutely leads here. Asia-Pacific, or APAC, dominates this market. It's the largest region globally and has the highest regional growth rate listed in this report.
Okay, let's hear the numbers.
Started at nearly $13.5 billion back in 2021. Projected to absolutely soar, reaching over $26.4 billion by 2033.
Wow. And the CAGR for the region?
A leading 5.945%, clearly the engine of global growth for these alloys.
And I assume China is a massive part of that.
You assume correctly. China isn't just a part of it. It's the single largest national market listed in the whole report, and it shows exceptional growth.
How exceptional.
Started just over $5 billion in 2021, expected to more than double, hitting over $10.6 billion by 2033. Its CAGR is the highest we see anywhere for a major nation, 6.519%.
6.5%. Incredible. What about India? Also usually a high growth story.
Same here. India is another huge driver. Started at $2.3 billion, projected to reach nearly $5 billion, $4.93 billion by 2033. Its CAGR is also extremely high, at 6.454%.
So China and India together are just pulling the whole market forward.
And massively. They're significantly shaping this global picture.
What about Japan? Still a major industrial economy.
It is, and it's a large market here, too. About $1.7 billion in 2021, forecast to reach $3.1 billion by 2033. Its growth is solid, but maybe not explosive like China or India.
And the CAGR for Japan.
It's 5.502%. Still very respectable, above the global average.
Okay, South Korea.
Another key player. Started at $1 billion, projected to reach $1.7 billion. Its AGR is 4.963%, so just under 5%.
Australia, Singapore, smaller markets.
Smaller, yeah, but steady.
Yeah.
Australia goes from about $0.32 billion to $0.53 billion. That's a 4.691% CAGR. And how does the rest of that vast region look? Southeast Asia, Taiwan. Southeast Asia as a whole is listed. Shows healthy growth. From $2 billion to nearly $3.8 billion, that's a 5.203% CAGR. Taiwan, also solid, $0.42 billion to $0.71 billion, with a 5.003% CAGR.
Okay. Now, is there a rest of APAC category? And does it follow the European pattern of high growth?
There is a rest of APAC, but interestingly,
Phew.
no, it's the opposite here. This segment, which bundles the remaining smaller markets, shows a surprisingly low CAGR,
How low?
just 2.23%. It grows from about $37.5 million to $58.3 million.
Wow, that is low compared to the region's average.
It really highlights that within this incredibly fast-growing APAC region, the growth is heavily concentrated in those major economies, especially China and India, and maybe less spread out than in Europe.
That's a really important nuance. Okay, let's turn south now. South America.
Right, South America. It's a smaller regional market compared to the big three we discussed, North America, Europe, APAC. Started at $1.7 billion in 2021.
Smaller start, but how's the growth trajectory?
Actually quite healthy. It's projected to reach over $4.1 billion by 2033.
Okay.
And its regional CAGR is 5.524%.
Wait, 5.5%? That's faster than the global average, isn't it?
It is faster than North America and Europe, too.
Yeah.
So while smaller overall, it's growing quickly.
Which countries are driving that pace? Brazil?
Brazil is definitely the key driver. It's the largest market there, started at $0.56 billion, expected to reach nearly $1.4 billion by 2033, and its CAGR is strong. 5.725%.
Okay. Argentina?
Argentina's listed too, going from $0.23 billion to over $0.5 billion. Its CAGR is a bit lower, 4.778%.
Any others showing particularly fast growth?
Colombia stands out. It starts from a smaller base, $0.1 billion, but is projected to hit $0.32 billion, with a CAGR of 5.698%. Very rapid growth.
And Peru, Chile.
Peru's projected CDR is 4.84%, growing from $0.07 billion to $149 million.
Is there a rest of South America?
Yes, and similar to Europe, this rest segment pulls the others and shows robust growth. Its CGR is 5.666%.
So also contributing significantly.
Definitely. Going from $0.67 billion to over $1.6 billion.
Yeah.
So yeah, South America as a whole is contributing meaningful growth, clearly led by Brazil, but with widespread expansion.
Good to know. Okay, 2 regions left. Let's look at the Middle East.
All right, the Middle East. This market's smaller again, valued at $1.5 billion in 2021, projected to reach about $2.37 billion by 2033.
Find the growth rate?
Its regional CDR is 3.512%. So noticeably slower than the other major regions we've talked about.
Slower growth. Where do we see that reflected in the country data? Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia is the largest market within the region, yes, but it actually shows the lowest CGR listed in the entire report that we have here.
Really? How low?
Just 3.02%. Its market is expected to grow from $0.61 billion to soar $0.95 billion over that period.
Okay.
Turkey follows suit with relatively slower growth, too. A 3.333% CAGR, going from $0.33 billion to $0.51 billion.
And the UAE, Egypt, Qatar, similar patterns.
Pretty similar, yeah. The UAE is growing at 3.811%. Egypt is very close at 3.739%. Qatar is listed at 3.664%, all in that mid to high 3% range.
So broadly slower growth across the major listed economies there.
That seems to be the picture, yes.
But is there a rest of the Middle East segment, and does it buck the trend?
There is, and yes, it really bucks the trend. It's quite the outlier.
Okay.
The rest of the Middle East segment, again, bundling smaller markets, shows a surprisingly high KGR of 6.676%.
Wait, 6.6%? That's faster than China or India.
On a percentage basis, yes. Now, it's growing from a much, much smaller base, only $81 million in 2021, heading to $142 million by 2033. But that rate is remarkable.
That really underscores your point about looking beyond the headlines. Wow.
It really does. Pockets of very high growth can exist even within slower regions.
Okay, finally, let's cover Africa.
Africa. It's the smallest regional market presented in this report data. Started at about $4.94 billion in 2021.
And the projection.
Projected to reach $1.74 billion by 2033. Its regional CAGR is 4.295%.
So below the global average, but still, respectable expansion.
Exactly, and a solid pace.
Which countries are highlighted in the report for Africa?
Nigeria is listed. Its tier AGR is 4.502%, growing from $0.23 billion to $0.44 billion.
Okay, South Africa, often the largest economy there.
It is the largest market in this report for the region, yeah. Started at $0.38 billion, expected to reach nearly $0.7 billion. $0.697 billion. Its KGR is a bit lower, 4.133%.
And the rest of Africa?
The rest of Africa segment, representing the other countries combined, shows a KGR of 4.332%, growing from $0.32 billion to about $0.6 billion. So pretty consistent with the regional average.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge amount of data we've just gone through, region by region, country by country. If you had to synthesize this, what are the key trends that really jump out?
Well, I mean, the most obvious thing is just how varied the growth story is, right? It's not uniform at all.
Actually not.
Asia-Pacific is clearly the powerhouse. It's got the biggest share, the fastest overall growth. And within that, China and India are just phenomenal growth engines. They're near 6.5% CAGRs are really driving things globally.
Yeah, and you contrast that with, say, Saudi Arabia at 3% or France just over 4%. It's starkly different.
Exactly. You see the more mature markets, North America to Europe, showing solid growth, but generally slower than APAC.
Right.
Then you have South America, which is smaller, but growing faster than the global average, which is interesting, led by Brazil, but broad growth.
And the Middle East, generally slower, but with that wild rest of categories showing super high percentage growth.
Precisely. And Africa, the smallest market overall, but still expanding steadily, it just paints a really complex, dynamic picture.
It really hammers home that point that a global market isn't monolithic. It's this collection of really diverse regional and national stories. And knowing these kinds of granular numbers is, well, it's essential if you're tracking industrial trends, looking for growth areas, or just trying to understand global supply chains for basic materials like these alloys.
Yeah, the precision matters. That global 5.3% CAGR tells you one thing, but seeing how Germany is at 5.5%, China is 6.5%, the U.S. at 4.8%, Saudi Arabia at 3%, that shows you where the momentum really is, where the shifts are happening.
So for you listening, processing this, the snapshot of the market, What's the main takeaway? I guess it's that the global market for these compound intermediate alloys is definitely growing, quite significantly, in fact.
Yeah, nearly doubling projected between 2021 and 2033 is
Yeah.
big. And it's largely fueled by that really dynamic growth over in Asia Pacific.
And hopefully walking through all these numbers, this granularity, it shows you how differently various parts of the world are participating in that growth. It's not one single tide lifting all boats equally.
Not at all.
Which leads us to a final thought, something for you to maybe reflect on based on this data. We've seen these diverse growth rates across countries and regions, China blazing ahead, parts of the Middle East growing much more slowly, South America surprisingly strong.
Right.
So the question is, what underlying factors might be driving those differences? We know these alloys are fundamental to industry construction, automotive, electronics, infrastructure. So how might things like different rates of industrialization in specific countries, or maybe booms in certain manufacturing sectors, or massive infrastructure projects, how might those kinds of national or regional economic activities explain the different speeds we're seeing in the demand for these essential materials?
Yeah, the numbers give us the what and the how fast.
Yeah.
Connecting that data to the why behind it. That's the next layer, isn't it?
Something to ponder as you look at the bigger industrial picture. We hope this deep dive into the data has given you a clearer and definitely more nuanced view of this important global market.
Welcome back to the deep dive. So you sent us this really interesting source, the compound intermediate alloy market, drivers and future. And the goal here, as always, is to kind of get to the heart of it, right? Understand what's actually important about this market. Now, compound intermediate alloys. I mean, it sounds pretty technical. Why should you, our listener, care?
Well, that's a fair question. As the source points out, these aren't just any metals. They're fundamental, like, building blocks for really high-performance sectors.
Okay, like what specifically?
Think aerospace, advanced automotive, critical electronics. These alloys make demanding applications possible.
So they're not just simple mixtures. The compound part means something specific.
Exactly. Elements combine in really precise ratios to form distinct compounds within the metal itself. And intermediate.
Yeah.
That often refers to their role in manufacturing or their unique internal structures. It's what gives them those incredible properties.
Got it. Okay, let's dig into the source then. What does it say are the main forces really driving growth in this market?
Well, what's really striking is how tied it is to the cutting edge. The source points squarely at booming demand from advanced tech and engineering.
Any examples jump out?
Oh, yeah. Aerospace is huge. The source projects that sector alone needing over, what was it, $27.5 billion worth by 2032.
Wow, 27.5 billion. Why such high demand there?
It comes down to performance needs. Planes, rockets, they need materials that are super strong, handle extreme heat, but are also light.
Right, the classic aerospace challenge.
Precisely. And that's where specific alloys mentioned, like nickel aluminides and titanium aluminides, become absolutely vital. They excel at high temperatures.
Okay, so that massive aerospace need is a primary engine. What other drivers does the source highlight?
It's also about just getting better material properties overall. Manufacturers need incredibly precise control over the alloy's composition
For what purpose?
to get, uniform strength, better grain structures, fewer internal flaws. These alloys allow that kind of fine-tuning. And then there's the big push for lightweighting that's driven by fuel efficiency rules, sustainability goals, you name it.
So using these lighter, stronger alloys in cars and planes helps them use less fuel.
Exactly. Less fuel, but without compromising safety or durability. That's key.
Okay, so advanced tech needs precision, lightweighting. Those are powerful drivers.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, these are complex materials. The source must mention challenges, right? Restraints.
Oh, absolutely. And this gets into the practical side. Probably the biggest restraint mentioned is just the sheer cost.
Cost of what? Making them. The raw materials.
Both, really. The production process itself uses a lot of energy. And the ingredients, things like nickel, titanium, sometimes rare earth elements, they're expensive. Plus, their supply chains can be vulnerable to disruptions, geopolitics, availability. It all factors in. High cost definitely limit how widely they get used.
Okay, cost is a big one. What else?
Then there are the technical hurdles, just actually working with these materials.
How so?
Many are quite hard, even brittle, especially at room temperature. So machining them, welding them, shaping them, it's tricky.
Requires special tools and skills, I imagine.
Exactly. Specialized equipment, expert workers. It adds cost and complexity.
Any other constraints?
Yeah, there's competition, too. For applications where you don't need that absolute peak performance, especially at high temps, other materials might work.
Like what?
Things like advanced composites, ceramics, maybe high-performance polymers. They can sometimes be good enough and potentially cheaper. Even improvements in, say, casting traditional metals can sometimes reduce the need for these specific intermediate alloys in certain cases.
Right, so it's a tough balance. High performance, but high cost and difficulty, plus alternatives nipping at their heels.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting for me: the future. Despite those hurdles, the source talks about significant trends. How is the market actually evolving?
Yeah, and the innovation here is directly addressing some of those challenges. A really major trend is additive manufacturing.
You mean 3D printing with
Right.
metal powders? Exactly. Using powdered forms of these alloys lets manufacturers create incredibly complex parts, custom designs,
Hmm.
things you couldn't easily make before.
What are the advantages there?
Well, potentially less waste, more design freedom, maybe fewer fabrication steps. You can also get really fine control over the material's microstructure. It's becoming super attractive for aerospace, medical implants, areas like that.
Interesting. What other future trends are emerging?
Another big one is the development of completely new alloy types, like high entropy alloys.
High entropy. What's different about them?
Instead of just one or two main metals, they often use four, five, or even more elements in roughly equal amounts. This can create materials with really exceptional properties: durability, corrosion resistance, stability at high temperatures.
Wow. So opening up new possibilities.
Potentially, yeah. New uses in energy generation, defense, advanced electronics, places we haven't even thought of yet.
Anything else major?
And finally, given the cost and, the strategic importance of these materials, there's a big focus on sustainability, the circular economy idea.
Like recycling.
Yes, recycling scrap metal, developing closed-loop systems where the material keeps getting reused. It makes sense environmentally, but also economically, given how expensive the raw materials are.
So, okay, bringing this all together, what does this mean for you, the listener? Why track this seemingly niche market?
Well, it means these highly specialized materials are kind of the unsung heroes behind a lot of the advanced tech you interact with.
Even if we don't realize it.
Right. The efficiency of the car you drive, the safety systems on a plane, they often depend on these materials pushing the boundaries. Understanding this gives you a window into the fundamental materials science challenges and also the really cool innovations happening right now.
Absolutely. Your source paints a picture of a market that's constantly evolving, isn't it? Driven by extreme needs, facing down significant hurdles like cost, but also being reshaped by things like 3D printing and totally new material discoveries.
They really are critical for pushing the boundaries of technology, essential for what comes next.
So thinking about those challenges, the cost, the difficulty in fabrication, and then these powerful trends like additive manufacturing trying to solve them, plus these novel alloys emerging, how might future breakthroughs completely change the game? Could these innovations unlock applications in areas we haven't even discussed today? What might be just over the horizon for these essential materials? Something to definitely keep an eye on.